Hey everyone, Ryan here at Etrailer. Today on our 2024 GMC Canyon, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster Crossbar-Style base plate kit. But before we do that, let's just take a minute, we'll check this one out and make sure it's going to be the right setup for you. I would like to address one of the big questions that a lot of people ask in regards to being able to set up their Canyon to be flat towed down the road. And that's, what parts am I going to need? And there's 5 main components or major components. You'll have your base plate, the tow bar, your safety cables, your diode wiring, and a supplemental braking system. And then there's a few other things I like to recommend for the Canyon, one of them being a battery charge line kit. With these Canyons, you also have to disconnect the battery when you flat tow. So I like to use the automatic battery disconnect switch. And then depending on what braking system you end up going with, for example, one of the stay and play duos like we have here today, or the Roadmaster InvisiBrake, you may need to pick up a Roadmaster Stoplight Switch as well. When it comes to the base plate, this is how it's going to look on the front of your Canyon, and I don't really think it can get much better, to be honest with you. It just comes out of the openings here that your tow hooks were originally in. So, you know, it doesn't really catch your attention by any means or anything like that. It does a pretty good job of blending in. I also really like too that they include brackets like this one, for example, to allow you to mount up some of your other components, like your wiring connector, which is here. And then on this side of the base plate, they give you a bracket that's already built onto it to allow you to mount up your breakaway switch for your braking system. So it's super convenient. You know, you don't have to bother with trying to find a good spot or anything like that. But more importantly, how all this is set up, you're not going to have to really modify the front of your Canyon at all. It's already going to utilize openings that are already there, so you don't have to trim and cut up the front of your truck. When you are ready to hook up to your motorhome, you can take your removable arms, and these are just going to slide into the base plate and lock down. Now with that said, this is going to be a crossbar style base plate. All right, meaning once you put these in, you'll have a bar that runs across the top of it. Like that. And then you can hook your tow bar up to it. This is going to work with the vast majority of the Roadmaster tow bars out there, as well as a lot of the other manufacturers. They're getting real good now. Let's say if you had a Blue Ox tow bar that you like already and you want to keep it, but you want this base plate, you know, you can get adapter ends that let you change them out to this Roadmaster style and allow you to pair it up. But something to think about with this crossbar style, all right, the base plate is only going to come with this arm portion. You're not going to get these brackets that bolt to the arms or the actual crossbar. So you can always grab this stuff separately if you don't happen to have it already. Our neighbor here today has been flat towing several vehicles for a while and already had this on hand. It's what he's used to, and so that's what he wanted to keep going with, which is definitely understandable. In some cases, you know, it's a couple extra parts that you have to deal with, but in some cases, it's not a bad thing. So let's say, for example, if you happen to have a motorhome that sits up really high, by using the crossbar style, you know, it's going to raise that attachment point up several more inches. So if your motorhome's high and the hitch on the motorhome's up real high, having this higher attachment point might eliminate the need to use a high-low adapter to keep your tow bar straight. If you're looking for something a little more simple in design and less parts or don't really have to worry about that type of thing, then the other option would be to go with the direct connect style, which is usually what I recommend in a lot of cases, but the crossbar style does have a place. But with the direct connect style, you're going to have arms that look like this. All right, and no crossbar or anything like that. And with these, you put them into the base plate like that, lock them down, and your tow bar would attach directly to it. As far as what models the base plate is going to fit, It's going to fit all of them with a couple exceptions. If you happen to have the AT4X, so like the beefed up off-road style edition, it is not compatible with that. Or if you happen to have the underbody camera system, it's not compatible with that either. But the standard AT4 like we have here today works just fine. The Denali's, it sounds like a lot of people are using them, you know, even more on the more base model type trucks even as well. So should be in pretty good shape there. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, whatever base plate you go with, it's gonna look good when you're not hooked up. Pretty easy to use, and it's nice you don't have to chop up the front of your truck to get these parts on. Now, as far as the installation goes, putting the actual base plate itself on really isn't too bad. It utilizes a lot of factory attachment points and things like that, so nothing too crazy there. The most difficult or time-consuming part would be getting the actual fascia off. You know, it's really tight, a lot of plastic and stuff, so just be careful, take your time, and hopefully, you know, along the way I can give you a couple pointers to make that a little bit easier on you. And if this is something you just don't feel comfortable doing or don't have the time or place to work on it, I definitely understand that. You can always check out our dealer locator, and hopefully that can kind of get you going in the right direction as far as finding a shop that can help you out with this. But with that in mind, why don't we go ahead and get started installing this one now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here at the front of our Canyon, and you can go ahead and pop the hood. We're going to have to remove our front fascia, and so we'll start with removing the 4 fasteners up along this edge here. So we'll have 2 on each side. The fasteners are going to be T15 Torx bit styles. So we'll grab our bit here, get them both removed, and from this point on, whatever we do to one side of our truck, we'll also do to the other side because it'll be set up the same way. Moving underneath the front of our vehicle, on each side, we're going to have 3 T15 Torx bit screws. So go ahead and pull those out. Moving to your wheel wells now, we're going to have more Torx bit screws. Along the edge, we're going to have a total of 5 of them, and it definitely helps if you turn your wheel in or out one way or the other to give you more room. But we'll go ahead and just work our way up here and get all these pulled out. This one up here is kind of tricky to see. You'll just have to kind of go by feel. Further down in the wheel well, there's going to be 4 more T15 fasteners. Get them all removed here. Once you get all those removed, you can take your fender liner and just kind of pull it out up till about there. Since we're going to be working in this area, kind of prying on it, I took some painter's tape, put it around the seams, that way we don't scratch anything up. But we're going to have to partly remove this fender trim here, and so if you kind of just start to pull down and out on it, there's some fasteners behind there, and they're kind of hard to get to be honest. So you can just work your way around, and then if you come in from the back, you can get to a couple of them. Once I get this more free, I'll show you what I'm talking about here. You can pull out on it, and what I was doing, this push pin, you come in from the back, you can kind of squeeze it with your fingers while you're pulling out on it. That'll allow it to release. We can just work our way up here. And as we go, and as you get this removed further and further, you can continue to kind of work the wheel well liner back to allow you to get your hand in there and actually get to those fasteners. You want to remove your wheel well trim to about here. I just took a piece of foam, kind of stuffed it in there to help keep it pulled away from our vehicle. And we're doing this that way we can get access to this fastener right here. And we're going to go ahead and remove that. It is also a T15 torque spit head. Super tight, so as long as you can kind of break it loose, and then you can usually just grab your bit with your hand and get it completely removed. Back in the wheel well, if you just continue to kind of push your liner out of the way, that will expose these two T15 screws right here, holding the fascia to this bracket. And so we'll pull both those out. Just over here on the passenger side, we're going to have an electrical connector that we need to disconnect. Depending on your model, you may have two, another one right next to it, but we just have this one. So what I'm going to do is take a little trim tool. There's a push pin kind of holding it in. I'll release it. And then to disconnect this, there's a red tab. You push down on it, and then if you kind of push them together more and push down on the center there, you can release it. Moving to the front of our vehicle, on each side here, inside of these little openings, back a little ways, you're going to have a 10mm head bolt. So if you grab an extension and of course your socket, what I like to do in the socket is take a little paper towel, put it in there. That way it'll kind of grab the bolt, and when we go to remove it, way less likely to fall out and get lost. So that's what we're going to do. Here's a better look at that fastener, and we'll do what we talked about here. Definitely have to kind of finesse it out. If you do drop it, it's not a huge deal, but probably easier just to do it this way. Now with an extra set of hands, what you can do, once you kind of start working everything apart, you can grab the corner of the fascia here and get to about this point on each side. And you'll work everything free. You can get our fascia removed and set off to the side. When you are pulling this fascia off, it's going to be kind of tight. That's why we were working it back and forth to kind of loosen everything up. And, you might have to take, a little bit of pressure. Ours came off relatively easy, but you might have to pull straight on it. And that's because there's a lot of clips, plastic fasteners kind of all over the place that are holding this on. If a couple of them end up staying on the front of the vehicle, you want to remove them. I'm just taking a pair of pliers, kind of squeezing them in, pulling them out, and then you want to reinstall them back on the fascia, right? That way when we go to put the fascia back, they'll be connected already and actually slide right into place. We can get our tow hooks removed now, and there's two bolts holding in. Of course, you got a nut on the other side. And we're going to use an 18mm wrench to hold the nut from spinning. And an 18mm socket. Pull those out. We'll go ahead, get our tow hooks removed, as we will not be reinstalling them. If your truck happens to have the shutters on the lower grille like ours does, you will have to remove this fastener here on each side. It's a 7mm and pretty tight, so you almost have to use a box wrench here to get it removed. can remove our bumper beam now. So on each side you have 3 15mm head bolts. And I got the 3 on the other side out already, so when you go to take this last one out, make sure you support it a little bit. You should be able to work this off and set it to the side. Looks like in our case, actually, we'll have an electrical connector we need to disconnect. So ideally you do this beforehand, but this is something I missed. I'm just going to put a bolt back in to keep this supported so I can get to this here. This connector is similar to the other one. There's a red tab. I'm just using a small screwdriver because it's pretty small there, but push down on the center and release it. We should be able to get this removed. I just pulled those other 2 out that I put back in. And we'll completely remove it from our truck here. Take our base plate now, and these are side specific, so make sure to check your instructions, make sure you got the right one, but pretty easy way to tell. The safety chain opening there, that should be facing towards the outside of the truck. These 2 holes are going to line up with these 2 holes where our tow hooks originally were. Slide that in place, and then you'll take your factory tow hook bolt, and they give you a flat washer. Go ahead and put that on. Push it through. Same thing here. We can move to the outside of the bolt where we can get the rest of our hardware on. We'll take another flat washer and then the factory nut and just get it started a couple of threads for the time being. Be sure now to take some red Loctite and put it on the threads of the hardware. And we're going to use red Loctite for all of the fasteners that we're going to use to secure the base plate, and I'll tighten them up pretty much all the way by hand. And what I'm looking to do here, because the bumper beam is more or less going to sandwich a base plate into position, and if we just blindly tighten it down, you know, the holes might not line up as good as we want them to. So ours are off just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is take a pry bar and hold it into position like that, and then snug up those tow hook bolts. And that way everything will stay in position, making it easier to get our bumper beam and those fasteners back in. We'll grab our bumper beam. Of course, once you get both sides of your base plate on, line this back up. Take that factory hardware, put your Loctite on it, and we'll get all of them started hand tight. With everything in, you can take your 15mm and snug all the hardware down. Want to make sure to come back with a torque wrench now and torque all the hardware down to the amount specified in the instructions. I'm going to start with the bumper beam bolts, and then we can change our sockets and do these factory tow hook bolts there. Now that we have everything torqued down, what I've done is came back and put those 10mm head bolts back in that we removed when we had the fascia on. Just easier to get to now, you know, with it out of the way. I plugged our electrical connector back in for our lower shutters and reinstalled those 2 7mm head screws. And at this point, it'd be a great time to start setting up some of your other flat towing components, like your braking system or your wiring. And I say it because with the fascia removed, you know, we have a lot more room to work. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. And once we have that wrapped up, we can, revisit this and work on getting the fascia reinstalled. I got our other components installed on the front of our truck, and now we're ready to get the fascia reinstalled. They do give you this electrical bracket here, which is pretty convenient. I'm going to utilize it. It's going to be on the driver's side and go through that opening there. And so we'll remove these two screws. This is 7mm head. Put that in place. And then simply just re-secure the screws. When you set up your other components, particularly your diode wiring, and if you're doing a charge line, make sure when you route those wires over here to put them through the bracket, before you get your fascia completely put back on, and to make sure you give yourself plenty of length to work with too. So just kind of a tech tip there. So we'll get that set up here. Get the fascia put back into place and re-secured the opposite way that we removed it. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster Crossbar-Style base plate kit on our 2024 GMC Canyon.